In the last section, we got a very quick overview on threads. We're now going to take that knowledge and apply it to the world of Node.js. Whenever you and I start up a Node program on our computer, Node automatically creates one thread and then executes all of our code inside of that one single thread. Inside of this single thread, represented by this blue box right here, is something called the event loop. You can think of the event loop as being like a control structure that decides what our one thread should be doing at any given point in time. This event loop is the absolute core of every Node program that you and I run, and every program that you and I run has exactly one event loop. Understanding how the event loop works is extremely important because a lot of performance concerns about Node boil down to eventually how the event loop behaves. So essentially, if you understand this event loop, then you will be very well equipped to understand performance issues in Node as well. But there's a little bit of a problem in understanding it. Understanding the event loop is tough. It's not easy. There are many talks, many blog posts, many diagrams online to help you understand it, but it is just notoriously difficult to wrap your head around. Luckily, I have a solution. I got a solution to help you understand how the event loop works. So rather than looking at some really complicated diagrams, you and I are going to write some fake code inside of our code editor. So we're going to write completely fake code that doesn't work at all. This fake code, or kind of like pseudocode, is going to sort of emulate the event loop and how it works to make Node work. So let's give it a shot. We're going to create a new file inside of our code editor, and then we're going to add some fake code to it to walk through what the event loop does inside of our Node.js programs. So I'm going to open up my code editor, and then inside of here, I'm going to make a new file, and I will call it simply loop.js. So again, this is going to be entirely fake code inside of here. The code that we're going to write here is going to walk you through the series of operations that occur anytime we start up a Node program on our machine. So let's first start off by adding a comment at the top that sort of like pretends that we are starting up a Node application. So we might start a Node application by running a command at our terminal of something like node myfile.js. And then maybe a couple of lines after that, let's add another comment that says exit back to terminal. So in between these two lines right here, we're going to write out the entire life cycle of a Node application. Everything from starting it up to exiting back over to the terminal. Now, whenever you and I first start up a Node file or run Node and feed in some file like we're doing right here, the event loop does not actually immediately get executed. Instead, at the very start, like when we first invoke Node and feed in a file, Node takes the contents of this file right here, the contents of myfile.js, and it executes all the code inside of it. So all the code that you wrote. Let's write out a line of code underneath the comment that kind of pretends or symbolically indicates that the contents of myfile.js get executed by Node. So maybe we will write out something like myfile.run contents, like so. So again, there's no variable here called myfile. There's no run contents function. We are entirely just pretending with pseudocode that this is what is happening inside of Node.js. Now, after the contents of that file are executed, we then immediately enter the Node.js event loop. You and I are going to represent this event loop with a while loop. So underneath this line, let's write out a typical while loop, like so. This event loop right here, or this while loop essentially, is going to execute again and again and again. So the body of the while loop is going to run again and again and again. In the event loop world, we refer to this execution of the body as a tick. So every single time the event loop runs inside of our Node application, we refer to that as one tick. I'm going to add a comment right above the while loop just to remind myself of that. So I'll say entire body executes in one tick of sorts. Now, as you and I very well know, every while loop that we ever write has to have some type of condition tied to it. We put that condition inside this set of parentheses right here. And whenever that condition returns false, the while loop is no longer going to execute. That same idea applies to the event loop as well. So every single time that the event loop is about to execute, Node first does a quick check to decide whether or not it should allow the loop to proceed for another iteration. If Node decides that the loop should not be entered or it should not be executed again, then the body of, or excuse me, the entire event loop gets skipped, or in our program, the body of the while loop gets skipped, and the program exits back to the terminal, like down here at the bottom. So to determine whether or not our while loop here, or our event loop, is going to execute, let's create a little helper function called shouldContinue. So I'm going to write out a helper function called shouldContinue. And then we'll call that from inside the condition area of the while loop. Now, as long as shouldContinue right here returns something truthy, the event loop is going to continue to run. But as soon as it returns something falsy, our loop is going to stop and the program will go down to the bottom of this file and essentially exit. So let's now take a quick pause. We're going to come back to the next video and we're going to start to talk about exactly what logic should go inside of the shouldContinue function. So quick break and I'll see you in just a minute.